Just give me words of sensitivity, and that you would be blessed in everything I share. In Jesus' name, amen. So, like I shared with you guys before last night, that the night sessions are a little bit more adult, dealing with some serious issues. Tonight we're going to deal with the issue of life. Now, this is something that's super important to me as far as abortion goes, because it has a story in my life that was really personal. This is a picture of me as a baby. Cutie, I know. And so that's where I started my male modeling career, and it ended for my injury and all those things. But anyway, it was going to be glorious. Anyway, it's a real personal story for me because my mom, she got pregnant out of wedlock, and she ended up having an abortion. And I didn't find this out till I was about 14 years old. And I remember when I was about 13, I was playing guitar and I was writing songs, and I had written a song about abortion, and it was really intense, really mad at the women that have abortions. I was angry, and my mom was like, I've had one, I don't know if you know this, and she shared with me what was going on in her life and everything else that had happened. Well, fast forward a couple more years, when after she had that abortion, she got pregnant again out of wedlock, and she was going to have another abortion because she was nursing, and she could barely support herself, and she was going to have another abortion. Well, she was a ways in, and she said that it was amazing because the supernatural thing happened for her, where she audibly heard the voice of God. She says if it wasn't audible, it was the closest thing to keep me. And so she chose not to have an abortion, and instead chose to keep me. And then she said, God, if you want me to keep this baby, then you need to provide for me and my baby. And so she started praying for that. And she didn't know God yet, so she started going to a Calvary Chapel in Boise. This is where I was born. And it was a little church of about 12 people. And she got a card sent in the mail, and here's the picture of the actual card. Now, the handwriting all on the left is my mom's handwriting describing what happened. And it says, the night before I received this card, I laid in bed and cried. My faith was wavering that night as I wondered how I was going to provide all that you needed. I had nothing for you, no clothes, no baby equipment, and no maternity leave. As I laid in bed crying out to the Lord, I was begging Him to forgive my unbelief. I went to sleep that night feeling forgiven, and I slept peacefully. The next day, this card came in the mail. Before I looked inside the card, I just read the verse over and over. When I did open the card, there was a check for $3,000. I called the church and talked to Pastor Bob, asking him who gave it to me. He kept saying God did. That money ended up enabled me to take 3 months maternity leave and buy all the baby things I needed. That is the Almighty Lord that we follow. And it says, this check was received and designated for you and your new baby. Praise the Lord. So here's my mom, not knowing what she's going to do, not knowing, can I provide for this baby? She chose to keep me, and God provided. What's super cool is my mom didn't really share her story much, but with a couple people, and she was working at The Rock. And she had shared her story with some people, and about how God had really changed her life. This is how she became a Christian, was through this experience. And so the pregnancy care ministry ended up getting a hold of her and said, would you give your testimony? And she got to share with pregnant young girls from the ages of 16 to 19 about the choice that she made. And they were able to make that decision to keep their babies also. Now, so this is a very personal thing, so I don't come at it like, oh, those women, or because I understand that women that have abortions, it's devastating, and it's more common than you would expect. And the other thing I have to say is that when I hear about kids who get pregnant in high school or right out of high school, I know a lot of people are like, But for me, the one thing that I've realized is babies are always a blessing. And life is always a blessing. And yeah, you shouldn't get pregnant in high school, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow night. But even if that were to happen, just know that God will provide for you, and that even if you decide not to keep the baby, God will provide somebody for it, for you and your baby if that ever happened. But I would assume none of you guys would do that. I'm not assuming that. But I have known girls that have been in our youth group who have gotten pregnant in high school, but man, their babies are such a blessing. I have to tell you, they're so cute and adorable, and just love them. So we're going to go into that approach. I want to tell you ahead of time, I'm not going to show any graphic pictures. I'm not going to use any graphic language tonight because I just don't feel like that's saying the truth in love. So tonight I am, though, going to lay out some serious truth that if you're pro-choice, that I hope to convince you by the end of the night to be pro-life. If you're already pro-life, I hope to give you reasons and logical arguments to fight for life. The coolest thing is that our country is becoming more pro-life than it is pro-choice. I just read that there are more clinics in the country that are closing than opening now, and that young people are more pro-life than they are pro-choice. That's awesome. Okay, so let's start with the most important one. Now that we've shown this afternoon that the Bible is true, what does God have to say about the unborn? It says that the Bible tells us that God personally relates to the unborn. Job 31:15 says, "Did not he who made me in the womb make them? Did not the same one fashion us in the womb?" Psalm 139:13-14 says, "For you have formed me in my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well." Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before I sanctified you, I ordained you a prophet to the nations." Doesn't that seem like God is saying that you're a person even in the womb? It makes it very clear that God considers people to be people even inside the womb. And then even in the Old Testament, there was the equality of the unborn. There was this law in Exodus chapter 21, verse 22. "If men fight and hurt a woman with child so that she gives birth prematurely, yet no harm follows, he shall surely be punished accordingly as the woman's husband imposes on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, strike for strike." So if two men are fighting and there's a pregnant woman, I don't know why she would be doing this, but standing there hanging out right near the fight, and one of the men hit her in the stomach and it causes her to miscarry, then that guy would be put to death or would have to repay in some way, or if the baby was injured. So it was eye for eye. Okay. In the Old Testament law, the unborn were considered human as also. Okay. Now, there's three forms of pro-choice. Okay. There's the first one that's the most common. They don't believe that the baby in the mother's womb is a human. Okay. You'll hear the terms fetus, and you don't hear the term baby. Or justified abortion, which we'll be looking at, where, yeah, you're killing a baby, but it's okay to kill a baby. Okay. And then you have modified pro-choice, which is you believe it's wrong to kill a baby, you would never do it yourself, but you think it's wrong to impose on other people not to kill their babies. All right? Okay, so the first one is the most common one, cells or human. In most cases, those favoring abortion agree that human persons are valuable. They disagree, though, on whether the unborn child, in fact, is an example of innocent human person. So the question comes, when does someone have human value? What's scary about this? Super scary. There are professors at UC Berkeley right now that are starting to propagate, teach that infanticide is a reasonable option. What is that? To kill your baby up to the age of a toddler, okay? That you should have the option to put your baby to death. That's what people in our culture are starting to fight for, okay? So the question is no longer when in the womb does a person become human. Now it's starting to be when in life does a person become human, okay? So that's one of the things that we're looking at. So arguments against pro-choice. So the judicial case. Many will denounce the use of the word murder to describe abortion. We are not extreme in using this word. But in California, crimes against the person, section 187, murder is defined this way. Murder is the unlawful killing of a human being or a fetus with malice aforethought. After the definition, we find among exceptions. This section shall not apply to any person who commits an act which results in the death of the fetus if the act was solicited, aided, abetted, or consented to by the mother of the fetus. The only difference between legal abortion and punishable homicide is the consent of the mother, according to the state of California. Isn't that interesting? So you can be put to death if someone forces upon you, or if I forced upon a woman and killed her baby in the womb, that would be considered murder. But if the woman goes into an abortion clinic, then it's considered abortion and it's legal. So we have a double standard here, where one thing is considered murder and another thing is not considered murder based upon the mother's consent. It doesn't make sense at all. All right, so let's look at the scientific case. The first thing we can do to help people become more pro-life is show that the baby is alive, that the unborn is alive. In the state of Texas, they require that every mother, before they have an abortion, has to have an ultrasound. Okay, and what's really crazy about that is as you hear the baby's heartbeat and things like that, they're like, whoa. They're like, there is something living inside me that I realize that I cannot do this, you know. And that's another thing for women who, you know, have abortions and later they see, you know, for sonogram pictures and things like that, they're like, whoa. They realize that there was a life. So if we can prove that the baby is alive, show that the unborn is separate from the individual or from the mother, show that the individual is human, okay? So here's the philosophical case. When does a fetus become a human? So viability is at weeks 23, which is able to survive outside the womb. So some people will say, well, the fetus becomes a human and considered human once it can survive. But the reality is that that viability, the ability to survive outside the womb, gets younger and earlier in the pregnancy as technology progresses. Okay, does that make sense? So as technology progresses, so it makes it viability earlier and earlier. Brain development. Some people will say, well, once the baby has brain waves, then it's human at that point. But if death is considered the loss of brain activity, they will say, shouldn't it be the same for birth? Now that kind of makes sense when you look at it, right? Because we considered someone clinically dead once their brainwaves stopped working, their brain stopped working. So people will say, well, if the baby doesn't have any brainwaves, then it's not a human yet. But the difference is that for somebody dead, they're never going to get those brainwaves back. For a baby, in a couple more weeks, they're going to start having brainwaves. So it doesn't make sense for that to be an argument either. Second, the baby can feel pain. Now, that's not a good argument because there are people who aren't able to feel pain because of disorders. That doesn't make them less human, right? Those who are paralyzed, they're not less human because they can't feel their legs, right? Just because a baby can't feel pain yet doesn't make them less human. Quickening, and I think this is one of the worst ones. The first time the mother feels the baby. But what about mothers who are alcoholics who never feel their baby, or mothers who aren't able to feel their baby for certain reasons? So the reality is it pushes it back earlier and earlier. You know, when does the fetus become a human being? Now, here's a good way, an acronym to help you make an argument against abortion. It's the acronym SLED. The first one is size. Is someone less valuable because they're smaller, right? No. All the short people are like, no, yeah, I'm more human. I'm still human, right? You're not human if you're not more human the taller you are, the bigger you are. Some people, they kind of view a baby, like once a baby gets down to like the microscopic cell level, they're like, well, it's just so small, so it must not be human yet, or whatever. It just doesn't make sense. Level of development. Is someone less valuable because they're less developed? No, right? There are a lot of people that are less developed. Some people have reading disorders, and some people are handicapped. Okay, it doesn't make them any less valuable. Environment. Are you less human dependent on location, right? Are the people less human that live in Salton Sea than the people that live in Borrego Springs? No, I'm just kidding. I'm not making any jokes at you guys. But, you're not less human because you live in Salton Sea or Ocotillo Wells or Ranchita. That doesn't make you any less human. It just means that you don't live in the greatest town ever, right? But you don't say just because a baby's in the womb makes it any different, right? I mean, it's just absurd to me to think that you could have, like, during an abortion, during partial birth abortion, if the baby fully comes out, they can be convicted with murder. But if the baby is still partially in the woman, it's not considered murder. That's ridiculous to me, that a couple of inches or a foot can consider if someone is human or not, right? D, degree of dependency. Are you less human the more dependent you are? I mean, Brian's super dependent, and he's still really human, Just kidding, bro. Not kidding. But I would be too. So you're not less human the more dependent you are. All right. Ignorance equals abortion. Some will argue we can't know when life starts, so we shouldn't hinder a personal choice, right? I believe that abortions that life begins at conception, but those first week or whatever, I know it's a really hard argument to make, but here's the thing. Our president, Ronald Reagan, said, anyone who doesn't feel sure whether we are talking about a second human life should clearly give life the benefit of the doubt. If you don't know whether a body is alive or dead, you would never bury it, right? So we should always err on the side of caution. So if we're not sure when life starts, let's just err on the side of never aborting babies, okay? Now this next one is what we would call justified abortion. 2 wrongs make a right. Bringing these children into the world can be an economic drain. Have you guys ever heard that before? When humans become expensive, then we kill them, right? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense at all. Women should not be forced to bring unwanted children into the world. When people become unwanted, we may kill them, right? Because what we're talking about is people that know that abortion is wrong, but they're saying there's reasons that it's okay to have one, okay? The fact that a child is unwanted is more of a commentary on the parents than the child. And if the fetus is a person, whether it is wanted or not is irrelevant to give right to life. Women should not be forced to carry a baby resulting from rape. Now, this is probably the most common one you've ever heard from the pro-choice movement. Why should the woman be punished? Why should the baby be punished for the father's crime? Pregnancy by rape is really rare. Really rare. I'm trying to see on your faces how much I want to get into this. But let's just think, we're going to get into a little bit of biology here. Women are only fertile one couple days in the month, right? Then you have a certain window of when women are fertile, okay, between, anywhere from 14 to 55, okay? So you only have a certain amount of women. And then on top of that, we have the high rate of women who are on birth control in our country, okay? It's not in my notes, but I believe it's like 60%, somewhere in there. You guys can look it up, okay? So you have to be within those 3 days, not on birth control, and within that age group to be able to get pregnant, okay? So really, statistically, we are looking at about 10 women per state per year, really. Okay? 85% of rape victims who become pregnant choose to carry the baby to term. Okay? So let's say this is my conservative. I believe that it's about 10 people per state. I've heard that it's 3,000 a year is what the pro-choice people will say. But even if it's 3,000 people get pregnant with babies through rape, 85% of them end up keeping the baby anyway. So why would we? It's such a small amount, okay? There are, in this nation, per year, 1.25 million abortions per year, okay? 1.25 million abortions per year. 1 in 3 pregnancies end in abortion, okay? 1 in 3. 50 million people have been aborted since Roe versus Wade, okay? That's a lot of abortions. Now, here's one of the things that I would like to say. Let's say we completely take away elective abortion and we just allow for rape and incest. We're still only talking 3,000 plus abortions per year. That's a huge drop in abortion, okay? So for people to say, well, we need to allow abortion for those who've been raped, okay, maybe, but the thing is that it's not the big numbers that they're talking about. It's not 1.25 million people. You want to hear something else, and this is just a side note on Planned Parenthood? They purposely target minorities. They place Planned Parenthood in places in low income, around Mexican and black families. It's straight racism. The founder of Planned Parenthood believed in euthanasia, which is the breeding of a greater race. And so she writes about it. She fought for abortion to put to death minorities. And it's scary. And more abortions are happening amongst minorities. And so it's really, really sad. All right, so justified abortion. Like we said, women shouldn't be we talked about 4 women per state, or 10, sorry. I'm personally against abortion, but I don't believe in forcing my views on others. This is called the modified pro-choice or pro-life cowardice is what I like to call it. So, people say, I'm personally against abortion, but I don't believe in forcing my views on others. You know, I think this is the most common view for our generation. It's like we're against abortion, but we don't want to hinder anybody from living their lives, right? But guys, we're talking about life and death here. This is like the one thing that we should all be able to agree on that we fight for is life, okay? Because if not, I wouldn't be here. There's an abortion clinic that's about to go into El Centro from Planned Parenthood, and there was testimony of one woman that just blew me away. And her mom was going to have an abortion, but she lived in El Centro, and there was no clinic there, and she couldn't get a ride into San Diego. So because of that, she was carried the baby past term where it was no longer legal to have an abortion. She ended up having her baby, keeping it, and the woman that was testifying was one of the ones that was supposed to be aborting, and she said, my mom lives with that regret every day. And if there was an abortion clinic, I wouldn't be here today. And she is so grateful that she never aborted me, you know? So, but here's the thing. Let me see if I understand you. I said, you are convinced that abortion kills an innocent child, yet you think the law should allow women to do that to their own babies. Did I get that right? The logic of modified pro-choice position reduces to, I think it's wrong to kill my own children, but I don't think we should stop others from killing theirs, is basically what it is. Another one is, if you don't like abortion, then don't have one. Saying, if you don't like abortion, don't have one, to those opposed to abortion is similar to telling the abolitionists not to own slaves if they don't like slavery. It's basically what it is. I posted that on Tumblr, and a guy called me a racist, and I was like, you aren't understanding the quote. But the point is that saying, oh, if you don't like abortion, just don't have them, you know? You shouldn't stop anybody else from having their choice. That'd be like saying, well, if you don't like having slaves, then just don't have one. You shouldn't stop other people from having slaves, right? If it's wrong, we should stand up for what's wrong and stand up for what's right. Not taking a stand is taking a stand. Regarding Roe versus Wade, imagine you're back in the 19th century and the court is confronted with the issue of enslaving African Americans. Suppose in the name of state neutering that it delivers the opinion that it takes no stand on the issue. On that basis, it allows the white Americans to own blacks as property. The court may verbally deny taking any position on this issue, but its allowance of slavery is actually morally equivalent to taking a side, that African Americans are not human persons. Likewise, the court's verbal denial of taking a position on fetal personhood is contradicted by its conclusion that abortion is fundamental constitutional right and that fetuses are not persons under the Constitution. Did you track with that? The court said we're not going to take any position on abortion. By doing that, you're taking a position by not stopping it. Okay? When there's wrong happening by not doing anything, you're doing something. And this is what can you do to fight against abortion? Well, the first thing is you can love girls that are going through that. You know what I mean? And you can point them to people that can help. Me and my wife would love to help anybody that goes through that situation. You know, any girl that gets pregnant in high school. I hear like the sad like mean girl talk that takes place when a girl gets pregnant. Oh my gosh, did you hear? I'm like, oh man, it's so heartbreaking, because that's a devastating thing to go through, and I want to be for those people and for those who have had abortions. I remember one time I taught Truth Quest, and I was thinking, oh, there's no way there's a girl in here who's having an abortion, and I'm just talking like I am tonight. And one of the girls came up to me and my wife afterwards, and she's like, I had an abortion 2 months ago. And she's like, and I didn't even think about all this. How am I ever going to live with myself? And, able to counsel her and stuff. So I just want to say that God forgives and God restores. And God, even those who've had abortion, He loves them, He forgives them. He's a forgiving God, and He wants to restore that person back to be whole and not let it destroy them. So, what can you do? You can come alongside girls and help them, and you can start spreading the word about abortion being wrong and standing up for it. And when you become a voter, listen, here's the thing. We can all disagree on Democrat, Republican. I'm not trying to turn you into a conservative here in that sense. But really, you shouldn't care about what their positions are on economics, immigration, anything, jobs, nothing. Life should be the most important thing when you go to vote. It's hard for me sometimes when I'm like, oh, I really don't agree with this person, but they fight for life. And I have to vote for them because it's the one thing that I hope to see that we as a generation, because I'm so excited because we as a generation are becoming more pro-life. And as the older guard leaves and the younger generation rises up, I believe abortion will be put to an end, and we won't have the 1.25 million babies dying. That's actually my son right there, sucking his thumb in his sonogram picture. And so, and this is my last thing that I was wanting to share. My wife, she had hyperemesis gravidarum, where you throw up about 7 times a day. She lost 10 pounds within the first few months. She only gained like 25 pounds over the entire pregnancy. When she had Cass, she was only 5 pounds within her original weight when she got pregnant. Okay? And so here she is throwing up every single day. And there'd be people that would come to us like, why didn't you just have an abortion? Why didn't you just, go in and get it taken care of? Those kind of things. And the reality is that what my wife could kill her if she didn't get treatment. Praise God, we live in the culture we do today, that she was able to get medication for it. But the point is that we need to guard life to the highest point. And that now I have my son, and I'm just like, oh man, I'm so blessed. And no matter what, no matter if you get a girl pregnant before you expect it to, or you get pregnant, I just want to let you know babies are always a blessing. Don't try to go get one. And this is my second point, is that with my wife getting sick, right, we took some actions to make sure that nothing else happened, right? Because we didn't want to take the chance. You can take some choices that we'll be talking about tomorrow night to make sure that doesn't happen, right? All right, so Now we're gonna go play some games for an hour and a half.